Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of USA Global TV and Radio. The content presented is for informational purposes only and is intended to foster open discussion and debate. Viewer discretion is advised. USA Global TV and Radio does not endorse any particular viewpoint and encourages viewers to seek out additional information and perspectives. Saving America with Dr. David D. Schein.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. So many stories, so little time. No to rebates. Pay down that suffocating national debt. I wrote my first book, Decline of America, because I was concerned about the national debt. Well, that was about 8 years, and since then, the national debt is $10 trillion higher. The trigger for this story is that the Trump tariffs have reportedly caused a surge of cash of around $150 billion. Trump is claiming they need to do a rebate. Hey, folks, this sounds like simple vote buying for the 2026 election. Well, if there's any rationality left in the world, and with the Dems committing one of the most dramatic political suicides in many decades, the GOP should improve its position in both houses of Congress without buying votes. In the meantime, being a practical business professor in my day job, I note that $150 billion is only 0.4% of our ridiculous national debt. Further, cutting checks costs money. In an informal poll I conducted on LinkedIn, my crowd overwhelmingly voted to pay down the debt. And while the economy did well with the early part of the tariffs, there is no guarantee that the economy will absorb even higher tariffs to be imposed soon. We do not know if this income will continue to accrue. So let's hold that money for now and let's see what happens next. China is the enemy of civilization. I think a positive of the new administration in D.C. is a new attitude about being truthful with the rest of us about China. This is happening across all media, not just the conservative media. While there were some reports over the prior 4 years, the frequency and variety of reports is increasing, and that's a good thing. We must have a world consensus that it's time to seal China off from the rest of the world until they join civilized society. Some quick China hits include China and Russia engaging in major naval drills in the Sea of Japan. In a previous Saving America, I mentioned the harassment of a Philippine ship in the territorial waters of the Philippines by Chinese ships. China's Navy outnumbers the U.S. Navy, underscoring the importance of having a close alliance with our neighbors like New Zealand. Speaking of which, the U.S. FBI just opened a special field office there in New Zealand to help keep an eye on the crazy Chi-Coms. I do not believe that the crazy has given up on taking Taiwan. We must continue to indicate that this will cause World War III if he does so. And he does not want that. He may want a lot of things, but he doesn't want World War III. A famous horror movie from 1956 was The Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It's now considered a classic of that genre. However, part of the fun is that it is sci-fi, not real life. However, we know from witnesses who have survived that China has been stealing organs from members of disfavored groups, specifically the Muslim minority Uyghurs. In fact, 5 states have banned organs from China. There's been a proposal in Congress to ban any organ transplants that come from China. That has not passed yet. I do support that big time. Another note is that China has started to prevent American visitors from leaving China, essentially building a list of hostage swaps for the future. The latest report was a Commerce Department employee and a Wells Fargo banker were being prevented from leaving China. It would seem that Xi is playing with fire if he's holding U.S. citizens and especially a federal employee. As an academic, I have some Chinese academics as writing partners. They always extend an invitation to visit, and I kindly decline. I do feel that if I went to China under Xi, for your intrepid host, it would be a one-way visit. Not acceptable, folks. Facebook is deleting millions of accounts. Recent reports indicate that Facebook has deleted more than 10 million accounts. The reason they claim is that they're trying to crack down on fake accounts. The problem is which are fake and which are not. While I'm on Facebook and Instagram, they are not my main social media sites. LinkedIn is where I am most of the time. I'm being solicited by fakes about once a day. It would seem that if there's an algorithm to detect fakes, LinkedIn would be using it as well. So the concern is how many legitimate accounts are going to bite the dust in the current operation. Keep in mind that Facebook has 2 billion accounts, so 10 million is a rounding error, of course, unless you're the one who has their account deleted. Redistricting season in America. Generally in the U.S., the results of the census done every 10 years means that the next state legislature meeting, say around 2022 for the 2020 census, would be redistricting. Well, due to COVID and other issues, the 2020 census was a mess. There is also no firm rule that a state cannot redistrict when the legislature feels like it. The highest profile fight is right here in Texas. The headline is that about 50 Dems have left the state to deny the Texas legislature a quorum. Governor Abbott has threatened to remove them from office, and that is in addition to a $500 a day fine. And we're still keeping an eye on this one. The issue is a redistricting plan that could result in 5 more GOP-leaning districts. While Texas would stay in the GOP camp either way, the extra votes would have an impact on Washington, given the current close count in the House of Representatives. In the meantime, California Governor Gavin No Sense has indicated that they might redistrict California to retaliate against Texas. That would have little impact as the state has so little GOP representation anyway. It also could not be done in time for the 2026 election. The Dems here in Texas are trying to wait out the deadline so that this change is passed too late to be applied to the 2026 election. The manipulation of the lines of congressional voting districts is certainly not new. The term used is gerrymandering. I learned about that term when I was in school. Eldridge Gerry, he was the governor of Massachusetts and the 5th vice president of the United States. To help his party win control in 1812, he signed off on new districts that were oddly drawn to help elect more of his party to Congress, hence the term gerrymander. This is a combination of his last name, Jerry, and the word salamander. While used across the U.S. for decades, post-Civil War, the concept was used to disenfranchise newly authorized Black voters in the Deep South. In the modern era, many redistricting efforts end up before the federal courts. The balancing act is between majority-minority congressional districts drawn to comply with the Voting Rights Act, in contrast with the Constitution's equal protection guarantee tied to the 14th or 15th Amendments. A recent Wall Street Journal article described the current approach as cracking and packing. Basically, the controlling party wants to crack or split up a contrary voting bloc while packing those who support that party. 2 stories about this situation. In 1992, I ran for state representative here in Texas in the general election. My kids walked the blocks with me. In many cases, one side of the block was in my district, but due to the gerrymandering by the Dems at the time, the other side of the same block was in a different district. This broke up whole neighborhoods. Now, these were state district lines, but the principle is the same for congressional districts. The other Texas story is that same election in 1992, the legislature created what was supposed to be a Black congressional district. Well, the only problem is that the experienced Dem politician who won that district was white. His name was Gene Green. He held that seat for 25 years. Dr. Schein's plan is simple. Start at the selected border of the state, either the south end or the east end, and then block areas geographically without any odd twists or turns until the target population for each district is reached. That would be fair and non-political way to define the districts. Time to end all of this nonsense once and for all. Second Lady Vance speaks in Houston. When I explain myself to people, I often use the term news junkie. I'll listen to, read reports, or watch the news for hours most days. Today, I took a lunch break and was, of course, watching the news. In a live report, I saw Second Lady Vance visiting Houston's NASA Space Center. She appeared with the woman astronaut stranded at the space station for about 8 months, Sunny Williams. The appearance to encourage children to read did not get any advance media coverage, but I thought it was a very positive event. Students were even allowed to ask questions of these two famous women. Creepy reports received by Trump officials from Google about the corrupt Biden administration. The story from Fox News has not received nearly enough attention. Apparently, after the November 2024 election, but before the January inauguration, the Biden Department of Justice obtained search warrants for Google accounts of Trump administration officials from his first term who were likely to serve in his second term. This was done with a packaged judicial order to Google prohibiting them from telling those administrators that they were being spied upon. My best guess is that this is the kind of stuff driving the current investigation into former DOJ prosecutor Jack Smith. I want to know which judge signed off on this. He or she would rocket to the top of my judicial impeachment list, which is rapidly getting longer.
All rise.
Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Once you hear from our next guest, I'm sure that you'll agree that she deserves the moniker of interesting person. Saving America welcomes Debbie Osborne, who's a social worker turned lawyer who has worked with youth-serving organizations, or YSOs, for more than 40 years. She jokes that she has a career ADD that led her into a variety of professional experiences before settling into a legal practice of advising YSOs. She served as a foster parent, juvenile court caseworker, private school teacher, camp counselor, mentor for young adults, volunteer, board member with nonprofit youth organizations, and federal prosecutor of crimes against children. She currently serves as a civil attorney and working with YSOs, defending lawsuits, assisting with internal investigations, and advising clients about best practices for child safety. She's never had biological children, but she has collected 7 children and 10 grandchildren. She's outnumbering me. She put the lessons that her children taught her in her first book, Raising Other People's Children: What Foster Parenting Taught Me About Bringing Together a Blended Family. Her most recent book is Protecting Other People's Children: 120 Days to Create a Strong Child Safety Policy, which she wrote with Tom Rawlings. We welcome Debbie Osborne for her first appearance on Saving America.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we're delighted to have you here. So you've dedicated your life to helping children, both natural parents and foster parents. What was the trigger in your life for you to pursue this important work?
I believe it was growing up with my parents, who were always involved with helping kids ministries. They had a summer camp 1 week every summer for the church, and they did a lot of church ministries. So I grew up in that milieu. Back then, we called them at-risk kids. Kids from broken families or dysfunctional families. And that is really what led me into being a caseworker with juvenile court. But, once I got there, I burned out. I got tired of dipping out the ocean with a teaspoon. But I still care, individual kids kind of get inside your defenses and wrap themselves around your heart. And so I wanted to stay in a way of helping them as much as I could. And so I do joke about having career ADD, but All of my different jobs kept leading me back to helping kids in one form or another.
Well, it's a fascinating background to get where you've arrived. And regarding your first book, please share with the audience some of the important aspects of being a foster parent, because the demand has never been larger, from what I understand.
It is, and it is very difficult working with government agencies because they're government agencies. It never gets any better. But the lessons that I learned, I always recommend that people go with a private agency, so you at least have some layer of advocacy and ability to advocate for you with child protection services. And then the other thing I found, and this is being both a foster parent and a step parent, is you have to remember from the kid's perspective, we are not the people who are supposed to be in their lives. They have it's almost a primal need for an intact biological family. And the Parent Trap movies, if you remember
Yes,
those,
sure do.
kids always want their biological parents to be in a family, and it is very hard for them to adjust to the realities of their situation. And it's almost like their life is going to be a record that's I don't know if people still have records, but it's going to be off center and off kilter, and it is hard for them to make that adjustment to recognizing that the reality they have is the one they have, and we have to approach that situation with a lot of compassion and empathy and understanding.
And may I assume that the age of the foster child, the older the child is, the more difficult that process becomes?
Well, it does. It really doesn't matter when the child starts with you. When any kid hits puberty, even biological kids in wonderful families, puberty just does a number on all of us. And so the closer they get to puberty, the more difficult their lives are. And that I always tell my friends about teenagers, all you can do is just, you treat it like a roller coaster. You just make sure the safety bar is down and hang on until the ride is over.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. My oldest grandchild is just hit puberty in the last year, and it's entertaining to see the
Yes.
interaction.
That's right. Well, the good news is the aliens will return their brain eventually.
I think that's a wonderful line. I'll have to tell my daughter that, who's
Right.
dealing with it in Technicolor. It seems sometimes that the grandparents, we do better with her than
Yeah.
her mom does.
Yes. Yes. That little bit of distance and that little bit of give and leeway in the rules, they will listen to mentors and grandparents a lot sooner than they will parents. And again, that's built in. It's part of the union rules for teenagers that they have to disagree with their parents. So.
Absolutely. Been there, done that, and in Technicolor, so fully understand. Uh, as a parent and grandparent myself, as well as a concerned member of the community, I do not think we can overemphasize child safety. Tell us how your new book with Tom Rawlings contributes to this important community focus of child safety.
Well, we wrote this for the lessons that I've learned from a lot of my clients over the years. And so we wrote this for youth organizations that I feel like they're dealing with a fire hose of information. They have to do all of these things and they have to do them yesterday. And so we set it out in a step by step, month by month format. You eat an elephant one bite at a time sort of approach. And so we set it out on a timeline. The 120 days is more of a goal than a deadline, but it helps people understand you don't have to do it all today. You do things one step at a time. And then the big thing that Tom and I have found from our clients is a lot of them are well-meaning and good intentioned, and they go out and they talk to experts or get information on the web or hire consultants who come in and give them a cookie cutter program, policies that just don't really work for their program. And so the staff eventually finds the rules too cumbersome, or they get in the way of the mission, and they have what in the industry, safety industry, you call normalized deviance, which is everybody just ignores the rules. And that, 95% of the time you're okay ignoring the rules, but it's that 5% of the time that it can come back to haunt the organizations. So Tom and I always say that the second worst thing an organization can do is not have a child safety policy. The absolute worst thing they can do is have a policy that they don't follow.
And what would you say are some of the key aspects of that? Because, I think about safety a lot, and I don't advise child organizations, I advise employers, but I emphasize how critical it is to keep employees safe. So I know what we talk about. I'm wondering, what are some of the key elements that you talk about with regard to child safety?
Well, the key elements, the first thing is understanding the purpose behind the rule so that you can adapt it as needed. So I will give you an example. I had a client call me one day, and a consultant had said to them, every adult who comes onto your campus has to have a criminal records check before they get past the door. Well, that sounds wonderful for some organizations, but this client was a summer camp, and they said, what do we do about Parents' Day? I cannot possibly get records checks on all the parents before they show up, number one. And then secondly, what do I do about repair people? The chances of getting a plumber on a Friday night who will give me a records check before they come fix my toilet, if they even show up on a Friday night, it is nil. And so that's an example of where we tell them, you look past what is the purpose of that rule, and that is you don't want anyone you haven't vetted to have access to the kids. So the much more realistic principle for that particular client or other similar clients is you don't worry so much about the screening prong as you worry about the supervision prong. So you make sure that if repair people come in, that there's someone with them at all times. That if you have a parents' day, you make clear to the parents when they arrive, they are responsible for supervising their kids. And you know which kids don't have parents there that day, and those are the ones that your staff needs to supervise.
Sure.
So that's when you look at past the rule and figure out what the principle is and how your organization can meet that principle in ways that work and that work consistently, and that your staff can do it on a regular basis.
Makes perfect sense. Well, Debbie Osborne, it's a delight to have you with us today. How can our audience get more information about you, your important work, and of course, your books?
Well, you can find me on debbieosborne.com, or we sell the books and have some online courses dealing with this. We have a lot of online courses for youth serving organizations at ysoacademy.com.
Please proceed.
No end to the corruption in Chicago. An oddball story from the Chicago Tribune notes that Illinois Governor Pritzker signed off on a pension enhancements for Chicago police and fire department employees hired since 2010. The pension fund is already underwater. Reportedly, the fund has only 25% of the money needed to pay already promised pensions. However, with this bill, the current reserve is now estimated to be down to 18% of the amount needed. This amount, therefore, makes no sense. My main demand that this is not a single cent of federal money is used to bail out this loser Pritzker or the city of Chicago. Let them work it out on their own.
How does the defendant plead?
Two former big brands are rising from the dead. While it's not quite Halloween, folks, we still have some interesting news on the zombie front. The brand Bed Bath & Beyond, which had its intellectual property purchased by Overstock.com, has operated only online for the last couple of years. And now will open some stores. The parent company is now called the Brand House Collective. It was previously known as Kirkland's Incorporated. This sounds a bit confusing. Hey, it is. I did some research and still trying to see how the pieces of Beyond Incorporated, which used to be Overstock before it bought Bed Bath & Beyond intellectual property that included Bye Bye Baby, came together. In any event, it will open its first Bed Bath & Beyond home store in Nashville, Tennessee soon. So we'll see how that goes, folks. Continued on the zombie front, Party City is now selling balloons and party decorations online, according to reports. Not sure how this will go, but the brand was popular, especially for family events. This was also a situation where another company bought some of the intellectual property of the older company.
Please raise your right hand.
Costco charging forward. Like many small business owners in a large city, I have both Sam's Club and Costco memberships. Claremont has had a Sam's Club membership since almost its founding in 1989. For the last 10 years or so, we've also had a Costco executive membership. Both chains have their pros and cons. While Sam's has been contracting a bit, Costco is expanding. It announced that it will open 4 additional stores in the USA this month as part of the 25 plus stores that it will open around the world during the next year. Frankly, I prefer Costco to Sam's Club, although for certain business supplies, Sam's Club is slightly better.
Objection, Your Honor.
We have an amazing story from right here in Houston from this last weekend. Harris County is the large county that surrounds Houston. It has its own police force. In the middle of Saturday afternoon, a handful of Harris County Sheriff deputies stopped traffic on Highway 290. This is a major multi-lane highway that connects Houston to Austin. The reason they stopped traffic was because a family of ducks, 2 adults and maybe a dozen ducklings, were queued up to cross that highway, that busy highway. Had they done so at the time, death was certain for most of them. The deputies stopped traffic to allow the birds safe passage across the highway. All I can say that I thought it was a very cool thing to do. After all, who doesn't love ducks?
May I remind you, you're still under oath.
As we grow up, a common reference for successor failure is the letter grade. Whether we are in grammar school or college, we all want an A grade and certainly regard an F as a big failure. Here at Saving America, we scan the news for reports of celebrities, politicians, or others who just end up in the public eye. So the A grades are awarded to people and organizations for great service to their communities, and the F grades, of course, are unfortunately more common, are awarded to those who need to do a lot better. A grade for a hero reporter. This is Dr. David D. Schein, and welcome to a special Saving America episode where I award a richly deserved A grade to a politician, so-called celebrity, or other person who ends up in the public eye. As my regular audience members know, I award a lot more F grades than A grades. It's so much more fun when the story has a happy ending. During a live Fox weather broadcast, Bob Van Dillen, a meteorologist for the Atlanta station, is outside in waist-deep water telling people about the flooding situation due to Hurricane Helene. Behind him, a woman is in a flooded car. She has the window down. He calls 911 for her. However, she starts to panic. Van Dillen tells his cameraman to take a break, walks to the car, and then takes the woman to safety on his back. Van Dillen has many years as a meteorologist and is a member of the American Meteorological Society. Therefore, Saving America awards Bob Van Dillen, the weatherman for Fox Weather in Atlanta, the coveted Saving America A grade for quick and heroic action.
Sustained.
My regular audience knows that I have kind of a love-hate relationship with regard to the new HHS Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I'm a longtime supporter of well-established vaccines, and while he has changed his tune a bit, it still causes me a little heartburn. On the other hand, I'm a self-labeled health nut with a focus on protecting our children. I'm very happy that RFK Jr. is calling on the food industry to eliminate potentially harmful artificial food dyes. Earlier this year, prior to Kennedy's confirmation, the U.S. banned the artificial food dye known as Red Number 3, which has been shown to cause cancer in animals and is used in foods, dietary supplements, and oral medications. Let's get on with it. Let's get these poisons away from our food chain and our medical chain.
Silence in the court.
Related to this, Trump just warned Japan and China against devaluing their currencies. One way for a country to gain an advantage in international transactions is to devalue their currency. This makes their goods cheaper on the international market, and this could balance Trump's tariff plan.
I'll allow it.
A former Federal Reserve advisor is indicted in a Chinese espionage scheme. Gee, what a surprise. This is indeed a disturbing situation. Federal prosecutors have charged 63-year-old John Harold Rogers with economic espionage and making false statements after uncovering his ties to Chinese intelligence operatives. He was from 2010 to 2021 a senior advisor to the Federal Reserve. The allegations are that he was stealing sensitive financial data for the Chi-Coms. In an interesting twist, he supposedly did this in 2018 while a visiting professor at a Chinese university. The Justice Department stated that Rogers was paid approximately $450,000 for selling out his country.
Order in the court.
Business students, business persons, or consumers, business law impacts much of what you do. This segment is designed to help you get past the headlines on key stories. Consumers Research is an advocacy group for what are generally considered conservative causes. It is a tax-exempt charity. It is taking on the FCC, that's the Federal Communications Commission, in a current case. The FCC is something called E-rate program, which provides subsidies for phone and internet in rural areas and for public services like schools and libraries. The key here is that it is funded by required payments from telecommunications providers. These payments go to a nonprofit corporation, Universal Service Administration Company, which manages the Universal Service Fund to finance those subsidies. Congress created the E-rate program and authorized the FCC to establish and oversee the Universal Service Administration Company. However, Consumers Research has gone to federal court in several jurisdictions to challenge the constitutionality of the program. First, it argued that Congress had improperly delegated legislative authority to the FCC. Specifically, this is a form of taxation, and that prohibits Congress from delegating its power to legislate to other branches of government when it involves taxation. Second, the plaintiff argued that the FCC had in turn improperly delegated too much authority to the company to basically determine the amount of the fees charged to the telecommunication providers. So this violates the private non-delegation doctrine, the principle that the government cannot delegate its powers to private entities. Consumers Research has already lost in the 5th, 6th, and 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. Meanwhile, SCOTUS denied appeals in the 6th and 11th circuits. In an interesting twist, however, the 5th Circuit Court of Appeals agreed to hear the case with the full panel of the 5th Circuit. It then ruled in favor of Consumers Research, holding that, quote, Congress's sweeping delegation to the FCC and FCC's unauthorized subdelegation to the nonprofit violates the Constitution. Now the FCC is back at SCOTUS asking the High Court to reverse the 5th Circuit ruling against the agency. It claims authorization by Congress and that the agency closely supervises the company established to handle the funds. This should be interesting to see how SCOTUS now rules.
Motion denied.
Walgreens taken private. Walgreens, along with its affiliated brands, Duane Reade and Boots, is a true household name in the U.S. However, a failure to keep up with the times and overexpansion of expensive retail locations has caught up with them. The chain has suffered in the stock market while closing many stores to stabilize its business model. In fact, while my local stores are still operating, I drove by a closed high-profile location this week. One article noted that Walgreens has been public for 100 years. The play is that a private equity firm, Sycamore Partners, will pay $11.45 a share in cash. Sycamore will then be responsible for the current debts and obligations of Walgreens. That could make the deal worth almost $24 billion. In previous shows, I have mentioned that CVS and Rite Aid have also been closing stores. Reports suggest that it's getting tougher for these big drug retailers to get reimbursed for some of the medications by insurers. I know Medicare and Medicaid are also getting more aggressive. I am familiar with the cost of some of the meds still under patent. You know, the ones with the silly and endless TV commercials. I've heard numbers like 5,000 a month, 10,000 a month, and even 20,000 a month. No wonder times are tough. I discussed this with a friend of mine who asked a key question. Why does anyone care about a public versus a private company? Hey, that's a good question. So I asked my favorite finance professor, and we agreed that for customers, it might not make that much of a difference. However, at the same time, locations may be reduced further and other changes to enhance profitability may follow. That could change the customer experience.
The defense rests, Your Honor.
Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. And when you hear this guest's background and opinions, I know you're going to agree with me that Saving America has got a great guest in Dr. Tomohiko Tanaguchi. He holds an LLB from the University of Tokyo and a doctorate in national security from Tanaguchi University. He has had a long media history with Nikkei Business Management magazine. During that time, he also was a Fulbright visiting fellow at Princeton University. Among other impressive credentials, he was president of the Foreign Press Association in London from 1999 to 2000. He is also a multi-published author, too long a list for us to go through. Dr. Tanaguchi is perhaps best known for his work with Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe as his cabinet special advisor and the Prime Minister's primary foreign policy speechwriter from January 2013 until September 2020, when the late Mr. Abe stepped down as Prime Minister. He now serves as specially appointed professor at the University of Tsukuba and senior fellow GRIPS Alliance, National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies. He teaches international political economy, Japan's strategic diplomacy, and Japan's post-war political economic development. And he teaches in English as well as in Japanese. I'm just happy to get through it in English, folks. I had the great pleasure of meeting him in person during my one visit to Japan about 6 years ago. We welcome Dr. Tomohiko Tanaguchi for his first appearance on Saving America.
Thank you, Dave. I'm very much pleased to be with you for this Saving America program.
And it is so good to see you after our last all too brief visit. And as you know, we ask our guests 3 questions. In a recent article, you explained that the election of Shigeru Ishiba as the new president of Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party, LDP, will make Ishiba Japan's next prime minister. Can you explain how that electoral process works in Japan? Because it's quite different than here in the United States.
It is indeed very much different from what you have in the United States. Because Japan does not have any presidential system. It is a parliamentary democracy akin to what you see in the United Kingdom. If you get a majority in the lower house, then the head of the major majority party almost automatically gets elected by the parliamentarians as the nation's prime minister. Theoretically, it's not the end of the story because the appointed prime minister designate is still a designate, because the final endorsement should come from His Majesty, the Emperor, because Japan is running a monarchical, constitutional monarchical system. So that's the process. The election took place on the 27th of September. It was not, by definition, an election of some kind of nationwide election. It's, may I say, a party affair or family affair, if you like, that took place only within and among parliamentarians and grassroots members of the party, Liberal Democratic Party of Japan. And someone called Shigeru Ishiba was elected finally by the two-phased votes. And the president of the party now is prime minister because the whole process has just finished, and he has put together already his cabinet of ministers of line government ministries. So that's the process. What's interesting is he, after get elected as prime minister, has chosen to dissolve Japanese lower house parliament, despite the fact that he has done very, very little since taking office. He says that by calling general elections and winning endorsements from the general voters, public, then he can pursue his set of policy agendas with trust he will earn from the Japanese voters. So that's what's going on and what will likely happen. And the next day for you to watch is 29th of October, this month, actually.
Very good. Well, we will certainly watch for that. So your exact question is, in your article, you comment on Ishiba's rise to power. You note that he was the leading rival of the late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and that its political star will likely soon fall. Would you please comment on this and how this could impact Southeast Asia?
Yes. Shinzo Abe, the late Japanese Prime Minister, whom I worked very closely with, his term, his term was one of the actually longest. It lasted more than 7 years, and 7 years and 8 months, and he had a previous term in office, which lasted for 1 year. So a total of 8 years and 8 months. Believe me, this is actually the longest record ever recorded by any Japanese prime minister since Japan adopted the system of modern politics back in the late 19th century. 19th century. So during that time, Mr. Ishiba, the new prime minister, was very much in the backbench, on the backbench, and he oftentimes criticized from Abe's back. And I witnessed those what Ishiba did against towards Abe many times. As the saying goes, in the parliamentary system, your political opponent may be in front of you across the aisle, but your real enemies are on your back. And that's what's happened since Shinzo Abe took office. And Shigeru Ishiba always criticized all kinds of policies that Shinzo Abe was after. So I detected a sense of grudge developed by Ishiba and between these two individuals. Now, he has tried to win the race to become the president first of the party and then get elected by the parliament as prime minister as many as 5 times. So he made a pronouncement before running that this election was going to be the last one in his political career. And then you could say for the last attempt, he succeeded. Now, he has said a number of sloppy things. By sloppy, what does it mean? I'm going to tell you what. He has proposed, number one, tax hike. I was very much surprised by his policy agendas, especially because he says that he's going to call general elections earlier than many thought. Is it true that Shigeru Ishiba, the new prime minister, is going to push this policy hike agendas, and then he's thinking that he could win the vote? Very few, if any, prime ministers or very few leaders of the political party have won by proposing raising taxes, plural, not singular, because he has proposed that he is going to raise personal, individual income tax, and then he is going to raise corporate tax. In addition, he said he would be interested in raising tax for capital gains. That's devastating. Reflecting that, the first trading day of this week, Monday, the stock index nosedived, fearful of Shigeru Ishiba's policy agendas. So that was point number one. And point number two is about national security or Japanese diplomacy. He has proposed establishing Asian version of NATO. What would you say to this proposal? Are the Japanese interested in bringing America further into the security situations in the Indo-Pacific, just as the United States has played the most significant role transatlantic? So without consulting very much heavily with the U.S. counterpart, you could not possibly propose anything like this, because after all, the United States is the most important, is the most powerful, is the most battle ready, if you like, provider of force, both to the Atlantic region and to the Indo-Pacific region. Wait a second. That has been in place for many, many decades. Indeed, the United States led the coalition and won the war in Korean Peninsula and got engaged in terrible battle and bloody warfare in the Indochina to primarily safeguard the rules-based international order that in turn benefited Japan first and foremost. Why? Because in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, this country, Japan, was the only industrialized democracy where when all others, including South Korea, were extremely poor and under dictatorship. So what's going to change even with this new arrangement of Asia's version of NATO? I don't think very little will change. The current situation for your viewers is that Japan has been hosting the biggest number of U.S. military personnel and the most substantial military assets, naval and Air Force and Marines on the soil of Japan. By so doing, the United States is able to keep its forward deployed forces in this troubled region, neighborhood of the Indo-Pacific. And the Japanese taxpayers have been very much willing to support and cover the cost of the deployment. And indeed, it's much less expensive, if you like, to put U.S. military assets and personnel in Japan rather than putting them on the soil of the state of California, if you like, in the United States. So that's the arrangement that's been tested by history, and that's been in place for decades. So what more net benefit, net gain the United States could expect from building this Asia's version of NATO is extremely doubtful, is an open-ended question. So that was the second question that came to my mind. Thirdly, he has not earned reputation, if I may say frankly, as a leader that could lead complex organizations. Some say he is very much slow in making decisions. He dodges difficult questions, and he dodges ultimate responsibility that otherwise should have been taken by the leader, i.e., Mr. Ishiba. And so he is not the sort of leader that's shown its leadership timber, if you like. All that being said, one should and could hope that he is a quick learner, and he knows what to be done, what not to be done, especially when faced with imminent challenge of general elections. He has to be more balanced, and he has to strike a very good balance when presenting his policy agendas. But so far, those 3 points, three factors that I mentioned, have worried me very much. Once again, whether he is a quick learner or not is something that I would very much like to pay attention to.
Well, that sounds like some very valuable information for those of us who do observe world politics very closely. And we have a little bit of time left. We did want to get to our third question. With your international experience combined with your domestic experiences, how does Japan view the United States these days? Does it vary with who is president, or is there a longer-term view?
Let me tell you how my previous boss, the late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, viewed the United States. His was an interesting experience. He first dealt with Barack Obama, and then he dealt with Donald Trump. Polar opposite. And may I say, he succeeded in building very good rapport with either of these two presidents. Why? Because number one, he paid very much substantial respect to the U.S. democratic process. Either of these two presidents was who the American voters actually chose. There of course does exist a huge divide between the two parties, but the net result is you choose your president. And from outside, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe paid respect to the decision ultimately reached by the voting process, democratically run voting process of the United States. Never underestimate the resilience, robustness of the oldest democratic system that humans have. And that's about the United States. So that's how Shinzo Abe viewed. Next, given the fact that the United States, the ultimate provider of security, not only to Japan, but also to the entire Indo-Pacific region, as head of the country that hosts the huge amount of U.S. forward deployed forces, it is incumbent always upon the Japanese Prime Minister to build as good rapport as possible with the U.S. President. So that was the second motivation. Certainly, there are growing concerns, like everyone else in Japan, about, may I say, the volatility of the U.S. political process, the deepened division between the two ends of the political spectrum, and the fact that the next, if elected, Donald Trump can stay in office only for 4 years, not 8 years, 4 years. So there is a likelihood, if I may say, that Mr. Trump is going to be shorter sighted, if you like, than before. So those are some of the concerns. And if you look at the political discourse found in Japan, you can see similar voices expressed by the Japanese pundits and policy opinion formers, just as you can see similar debates and discussions in any countries, in any other country like the United Kingdom, France, or Germany. But let me put just one thing. Very few people in Japan say sort of derogatory, nasty things about either one of those candidates, especially about Donald Trump. Well, it's become sort of national pastime for some countries in Europe to say very much nasty, derogatory things about Donald Trump, but you wouldn't hear much about much of those dirty words spoken by the Japanese politicians or opinion formers when it comes to Donald J. Trump.
Fascinating situation. Dr. Tomohiko Tanaguchi, how can our audience get more information about you and your many writings?
Right, just Google my complex name, Tomohiko Taniguchi, and you can find a lot of live interviews that I gave to international broadcast networks such as CNN, BBC, and so on and so forth. And if you cross-check my full name and Foreign Affairs, one of the prominent magazines in the United States, you can see what I wrote recently about China and Sino-Japanese relationship. And also, if you cross-check my full name and The Economist, British news magazine, then you can find what I wrote as a sort of obituary for the late Prime Minister.
Which I read also, yes, a very fine piece and a very nice salute to a very positive world leader.
This session is adjourned.
Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. Schein, and I will see you next week.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.